Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. I'm your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker. Thank you for joining us. However you may be joining us, we appreciate it very, very much. Always glad to have with me here in the studio people who are excited about helping us learn a lot of the things that maybe we take for granted or maybe we don't understand, but always those that can lead us, especially through the church. I welcome to the program Father Alex Gaudet, pastor over at Christ the Redeemer. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Keith. I'm glad to be here.
We appreciate it. And, you know, Lent is one of those times, especially Ash Wednesday. I think people hear Fat Tuesday and all of the things that people do in South Louisiana to lead right up to that day of Fat Tuesday and then leading right into Ash Wednesday. But it's a really important time in the liturgical year.
You know, I like to tell people that Lent is our yearly retreat.
Okay.
So people will try and make a retreat. It's a good thing when you feel stuck in life to get away.
Right.
And the church's wisdom is that you probably need to do this every year, probably a couple times a year anyway, just to get away from the noise, get away from the rhythm, get away from all the other things you've got going on and do something different. It's not about doing any one particular thing, but just to be different. And so the church gives us the great fast of Lent as a time to put the pieces of our hearts back together so that I can be reordered and reorganized, so I can go back and tackle the future. Now, of course, the traditional reason, the reason that is given to us in the liturgy for why we do Lent is to prepare ourselves for Easter.
Right.
And the difficulty is, like, how do you do that? Like, I mean, what do I need to do to prepare myself for Easter? And a lot of it is I get away, I have the silence. My practices of life, I change them. You give up something for Lent. Like, that makes you change a lot. If you were to give up, say, sweets for Lent, you're not making a dessert when you invite people to your house.
Right.
And your friends and family are going to experience at least a little bit of what your penance is. It forces you to change. We become very aware of the no meat on Fridays thing during Lent. And granted, we live in the best place in the world to not eat meat on Fridays. But if you're like me, that seafood is not my number one go-to. Lent is a tremendous drag because every week that Friday comes around and you have to forego it. And it sort of demands something out of you. And so customarily over the ages, in preparation for Easter, you would move into a period of extended prayer, extended fasting, and extended abstinence. And all of these things are meant to connect you to the wider world. So fasting is probably the easiest piece to get because when you fast, you're hungry. Now, fasting has become very popular recently as intermittent fasting has become a thing.
Right,
and it's a little bit divorced from its customary place throughout most of human history. But the purpose of fasting is to feel the hunger. You have to learn to control yourself, right? Or you're not going to do the fasting.
Right.
But when you feel the hunger, one of the things it does is you feel what it feels like to be very poor, to live as the poorest of the poor do, because our very much impoverished brothers and sisters, they don't know where their next meal is coming from. And so if you live this life of poverty and just, you know, you're skipping your noontime meal or you're skipping your evening meal or you're eating something smaller rather than what you would ordinarily eat, sure, by the end of Lent, you'll lose a few pounds. But more importantly, you'll develop a level of self-control that you wouldn't ordinarily have been able to achieve. And you get to live in solidarity with the poor. The same thing happens with almsgiving. If you're giving money to the person on the side of the road or you're finding some charity, you know, right now there's a few places that are starting to collect money for the people in the Ukraine. We still very much need people to send us money here for our families and friends and relatives who are still displaced and hurt from Hurricane Ida. As you give those funds away, you're detaching yourself from that material wealth that maybe you work really hard for. But if it rules you, you don't rule yourself. And by becoming detached from it, you get to live in solidarity with the poor, and it transforms you from the inside. And then obviously, prayer is a supreme act of humility where I turn from myself, where I can think that I have got everything covered, towards somebody who actually has everything covered. And I can live in not only humility, but also reality that, no, I don't have all this covered.
Right.
And usually it takes an event like, say, Hurricane Ida or the invasion of a sovereign nation by another sovereign nation to make you start to understand, I do not have control over these things. And so Lent is a time to prepare ourselves and to be reminded of why we actually needed a Savior at all at any time, because we couldn't save ourselves. And so I move into this period of recognizing my own impoverishment and needing to listen and grow and hear the voice of the Lord, so that when he does come in Easter, because we've been in this time of fasting, we're able to better celebrate and celebrate with a recognition for how good the good things we received are. Because it can be easy, especially like you said, during Mardi Gras, you lose touch with how rich and decadent our life here is. Not only in the United States of America, but particularly in South Louisiana. Right. How we always have access to some of the best food, some of the best drink, some of the best entertainment in the entire world, and most people don't.
Yeah, and if we can spend some time in prayer about not spending that money on foods and really find a way to fast, we can have that money for almsgiving.
Yeah.
It's a way that it can feed itself into another aspect of our lives that we can share with others. And truly, that's the thing, is we're asked to open our heart to how do we help others. And the best way to do that is to kind of look within to see how we can make our situation a little less messy. One of the things that it's really interesting, what a great time, and thank you for your explanation about what Lent is like, what preparation for Lent is like, what Ash Wednesday represents. But we've got a great opportunity for the men in our area, and according to Father Mark, everybody in, especially home in Thibodeau, to really be able to come to one of these places and really be able to really kickstart what the beginning of the Lenten season is like with this Rise Up conference.
Yeah, so Rise Up came out of a place from two different desires. One of which was in the wonderful Diocese of Baton Rouge. There's an annual event around this time of year in order to help the guys enter into Lent that we wanted to bring here.
Okay.
That's part of it. The second part is in our diocesan strategic pastoral plan that we started in about 2015, right when I was ordained. One of the things is that we wanted to look for ways to do evangelization, and the way to get evangelization in to spread the word of Jesus Christ is you need a 0-point entry. So if you've ever been in a wave pool, usually they start when you walk in the water.
Right.
Instead of diving into a 3-foot pool, you're walking in. So it's easier. And all of us, I don't know if you do this. I do this. When I need to go to a new doctor, I do it the old-fashioned way too. Like I go talk to people. I'm like, hey, do you know a dentist or somebody that can help me out? But I also then pull out my phone or get on my computer and I look every place up.
Right.
To see, because my looking at the internet nobody knows. Nobody knows I'm doing that research. But when I'm asking, everybody knows.
Right.
So there's a habit forming amongst all of us that we like to be able to find out about something before I have to commit to it. So it's a non-committal way to get involved. And faith, aside probably from politics, is the one thing nobody wants to get involved with unless they've had an opportunity to experience it. So if you've been able to experience in a non-committal way, then you might be able to move to the next phase. So Rise Up is a one-day conference held during the Lenten season to call the men, particularly of Home of Thibodeau, back to the Lord so that we can enter more deeply into the experience of Lent. And it's for everybody. Anybody can come. They'll get something out of it. If you're just, I don't know about this Jesus thing. If you are, I've been away from church, at any church for a long time, this is the benefit of conferences. Nobody's going to know you.
Right.
You can walk in, go to the conference, leave whenever you want. We're not going to, check your at the door when you leave. Right. And you don't have to come back to anything afterwards, but you do get to come the first time and see what's going on, hear something of what we have to offer in a way that's non-committal, and you'll be able to go to the next step if that's what you want. Of course, it's not limited to those people. Right. Maybe you're just going through a hard patch, or maybe this is the first time in your life you've met resistance from life itself. this is a place to come and be rejuvenated and refreshed. And if you've been to the thing 4 or 5 times, it's good sometimes to come back to the same things every year. Nobody faults Christmas for coming around every year on December 25th, right?
No, we certainly welcome it.
Especially you get in the spring, the weather's changing. You just move through the great celebration of Mardi Gras into the season of Lent. You're putting we put our shoulders down as we move through this, awful season of rains and preparing potentially for hurricane season again. That this is something to get you back to like zero and be ready to face the new day.
Well, and I can tell you, for me, it was really interesting. I hadn't had it in 2 years, and it was so very unique because of some of the people that I know very well. Mark Toops and I have been very good friends for many years. I've gotten to know Bishop Fobb here and now Archbishop Fobb, and Wade is coming in. And this is a unique opportunity to get some good inspiration from some people. And Christ Redeemer is just the best place to have this, right?
Yeah. It's kind of our church is kind of set up ready for like a conference environment, the way that everything kind of fans out.
It's kind of open.
And one of our goals with Rise Up was that we would reach out to speakers who could speak to the men. That at least to have somebody that your average person just walking down the road here might say, I don't know anything about the rest of this stuff, but I know I want to hear that guy.
I want to
speak.
hear from that guy.
And,
right.
and as a guy who is not, I am a fair weather sports fan.
Okay.
If there's a bunch of people around me watching the sports, then I'm totally into it. But if I'm by myself, I'm not paying
Not really
attention at
watching
all.
it. Okay.
And even I remember his story when it happened. That's how big of an impact it was throughout the whole state of Louisiana as just an event, something that happened to people around.
Absolutely. And I was fortunate. I sat 2 seats down from where she was.
Yeah.
In the dome. And so it really made a big impact for me. But let's put the flyer up because I want to introduce this, and I want to let Father Gaudet talk a little bit about it. It's Rise Up, a one-day gathering for men on March 5th, 2022. And it's Life is Messy,
Yes.
which is from the book by Matthew Kelly, Life is Messy, which was a chapter in his original, one of the books that most people knew him from, which was Resisting Happiness. And so just tell us your final thoughts here in the last 45 seconds here, Father.
At Christ the Redeemer, some number of years back, Father Mark did a homily series throughout a whole season on Life is Messy. And my personal experience of this, I felt like I lived in a very safe world until 9/11. I thought I lived in a very secure world until Hurricane Katrina. And then all of a sudden, we have this irrefutable experience that life is not what you think it's going to be. Anything can happen. And my experience in confession is people are very sensitive about when they realize their life is messy. And you got all these people that they clean up their house before you come visit.
Right.
And you expect a life has got to be totally clean. And that's just not the way things are.
Well, Father, I appreciate your time. Very glad to have spent some time with Father Gaudet and the options that he's shared with about Rise Up. And now we would like to share with you a very special message from Father Mark Toops about Rise Up and why life is sometimes messy. Father Mark?
Welcome. My name is Father Mark Toops, a priest of the Diocese of Houma Thibodeau, with a special message to the men in our area, especially my brothers in the Houma and Thibodeau area. If you've been looking for a sign from God that He's calling you to take the next step, then this is it. He is speaking to you right now, especially if not only you're searching for God or in need of God, but especially if your life is messy. So many of us, if we're honest, know what it's like for life to feel messy. It's been almost 2 full years since COVID invaded our lives without our permission, and yet it has affected every one of us. Whether we have been touched physically by COVID or certainly the circumstances of life have been influenced by COVID, it has been messy these last 2 years. It's affected us relationally, some of us professionally and financially, but it's affected all of us, and life has just felt messy because of COVID. Then you throw in Hurricane Ida and all that was the last 4 months of last year. You throw in the early weeks of this year in Hurricane Ida, whether it has affected you physically with your home or possessions, or whether it has just affected all of us emotionally. The visual mess of it all, but also the emotional mess of dealing with all that. And yet sometimes it is the external circumstances of life that make life feel messy. But sometimes for men, if we're honest, it's actually the interior circumstances that make life feel messy, right? So many men, especially some of us who are watching right now, know what it's like to struggle with habitual sin. Sometimes the sins that people are aware of, and sometimes the secrets that are inside your heart. Maybe you know what it's like to struggle with things that you just can't let go of, right? Resentment, unforgiveness, expectations that weren't met either by life or of yourself or other people. But sometimes in a man's heart, if he's honest, it can be real messy in there. And that's when we need God, who's not afraid of the mess, to be with us. And if that's where you are, if you're searching for God, if you need something to jumpstart your spiritual life, or if you just need to know that you're not alone in the mess, then I want to welcome you with a special invitation. This Saturday, March the 5th, at Christ the Redeemer Catholic Church in Thibodaux, they are hosting their annual Rise Up Men's Conference. It's an opportunity for men in our area to gather for one day, for a special day for God to speak to us. Excited this year about our keynote speaker, Mr. Wade Berzos. You may remember that legendary 2019 LSU football season when LSU won the national championship. And you may remember in the semifinal of the playoff when LSU played Oklahoma in the Peach Bowl that the whole LSU community was dramatically affected by a plane crash that affected the lives of the LSU coaching community. The lone survivor of that crash was Wade. And Wade has a story of finding God in the midst of that tragedy. And every day since then, talk about a man who has dealt with some traumatic things in life, some messy things in life. And he's a guy just like you are. He's a guy who's searching for God just like you are. And he's got a message of how he found God in the mess. And he's got a message that's going to help you find God in the midst of the circumstances in your life. The book that we're going to use this year for the conference is Life is Messy by Matthew Kelly. And we have an action-packed day for you. Let me walk you through some of the details. Breakfast and check-in is going to be at 7:30 a.m. at Christ the Redeemer right there on Talbot Avenue. At 8:30 a.m., Archbishop Shelton Fobb, our bishop now just for a few more weeks before he transitions to Louisville at the end of the month, is going to celebrate Mass at 8:30, a special opportunity for Archbishop Fobb to be with the men of our area, to not only bless them, that to say goodbye to them, and to share his heart with them. Every one of the participants is going to receive a copy of the book, Life is Messy, and our talks are not only going to be anchored by Wade, but we're also going to welcome this year Father Patrick Riviere as well as Friar Antonio Speedy, two great priests of our diocese who are going to speak to the hearts of all the men that are there. We're excited about our folks who are helping sponsor this year's event. We have a Bourgeois Meat Market as well as Spar's Restaurant who are going to be providing some hospitality for us. And if you want to learn more, you can go to ctr-htdiocese.org and you can search for Rise Up, or you can just search in Google for Rise Up Thibodaux, and it will bring you to the landing page with all the information that's there. Again, that's Rise Up, a one-day men's conference this Saturday, March the 5th. It's going to registration starts at 7:30, and the day is going to wrap up around 3 p.m. Really want to encourage you to join us this year. Want to encourage you to bring other men with you, but want to encourage you to register now as space is limited, and we want to make sure that you have a seat at the table. Again, you can go to the internet, ctr-htdiocese.org, search for Rise Up, or just look for us on the web. We look forward to seeing you on this coming Saturday, and until we see you at Christ the Redeemer for Rise Up. God bless.
And again, that was Father Mark Toops. And I can tell you that Rise Up is everything that they say it is, plus a whole lot more. I was so very fortunate to be in attendance with that, as I mentioned earlier. And I challenge you as well that if you're feeling called to do that, as Father Mark referenced, go to the website, as he mentioned, and sign up. It's very simple to do, very easy. It's only $35 for the day. It's very well worth your time, and it's a good way to say goodbye to the bishop. So that will do it for this edition of Bayou Time. Don't go anywhere. A lot more local programming here on HTV when we continue.